In that case, let's get started. Really brief, this is what I'm going through today. The why, the what, and some examples of the RCOS database. I'm assuming you have no previous knowledge of what that is besides me ranting about it randomly throughout some RCOS meeting slideshows. Okay. So right now I'm recording. I'm going to be posting the recording probably on YouTube and then hopefully also on Venue afterwards. So keep an eye in the workshop channel for that afterwards if you want to go back. And pretty interestingly, this presentation is open source. It's written in HTML using the Reveal.js framework. And to show you how easy that is, look at this. Here's the code for the previous slide. Wow, isn't that cool? And you can find the source code for this workshop and any future workshops I host in my GitHub repository, RCOS-workshops. Again, if you want to click on any of these links, open the link to these slides and you can just find them through there. So here is let's call it an executive summary of this whole workshop. You can drop out after these two slides. Ready? This was RCOS data then. The dark ages, terrible. People dying, what a mess. And this is RCOS data now. This is entirely true. So let's get some detail. Where do we start? Well, in the beginning, RCOS was anarchy. I didn't choose that phrase randomly. That was actually the phrase that RCOS used at the start. By definition, they would say, RCOS is anarchy. And now that works really well when you have 10 people in RCOS, 20 people in RCOS, 30, 40. Fast forward a few years, and it doesn't really work as much. RCOS grew and grew and grew and grew and grew to the point where, now it's usually around 200 students per semester. Back in in-person times, it was sometimes even higher than 200 enrolled students each semester. This is, of course, because it's the greatest organization on campus, right? So as a result, there had to be a way to manage this organization. So what did we do? Well, the previous leadership said, okay, we're going to create a public website for RCOS, and I'll organize some of the data. If you heard of Observatory, that's what that is. That is RCOS.io. Unfortunately, that's not used anymore. So it's a little confusing now because that's our public-facing website, but also it's dropped. It's a mess. However, we also needed slideshows. We needed forms and documents, so we made a Google Drive. Organized by semester, but still not the best, right? We just have a folder of slideshows and we have to copy-paste the slideshow. So if you ever see the date is wrong in a large group meeting, it's of course because I copied the slides and then got lazy and forgot to change the date. Not the best. And then at some point, Submiti comes along and it tries to handle some of our stuff, right? Now it does attendance and status updates. That makes some things easier, other things harder. Love Submiti though. And of course we have Venue as well. So there are a couple problems that have led to this and kind of compound these. Firstly, we get kicked out. Any organizations, any clubs on campus, you have a high turnover rate, right? People are graduating just as they're getting experienced. So when I became a coordinator, I didn't even have the torch passed down to me because those people were like doing 5 courses at a time. Those seniors, they were doing their best and then they left, right? Just as they were getting really used to the role. That makes it really hard to keep things organized. And 2, RPI is exhausting. So this has an effect on everything we try to do with RCOS. We have so many ideas and so many goals and visions, but RCOS is not the only thing we do. It's one of the 5 or 4 courses we do each semester. Not fun. If I could, I would only do RCOS each semester, though I did that. That's how I got a C in data structures my freshman year. Good times. So this eats up our time and our energy. So those 2 problems, not a good combination. As a result, all of our data for the whole club is disorganized, it's unstandardized, it's spread out over like 4 or 5 different services. It's Google Drive, multiple different versions of observatories, Submiti. What a mess. This is why it might seem like we are getting by the skin of our teeth each meeting. It's because sometimes we are. all those reasons kind of combine and make it pretty difficult to run the club. So what? Obviously, we've gotten by without any database or any like fancy infrastructure. So who cares? Is it really that important? Well, without any organization, so just going off of what we had previously, what I just described, we can't answer these simple questions. And this is what drove me crazy. We can't easily tell how many students have been taking RCOS in total. Like, how many students have ever gone through RCOS? How many unique people? Or how many people are taking RCOS for credit this semester? Or how many students are new to RCOS this semester? Or how many students are in RCOS for their, their fifth semester this time, right? We can't even easily answer questions like who started what project and when. All that data, it might be in some Google spreadsheet or it might be in like some old submittee page. We can't easily answer these. Some of these we can't answer at all. Some of them we can answer if we just beg Professor Turner to find a minute of his free time or like 30 minutes to go deep dive into our mess of stuff and find things. We also can't figure out who was on the project a particular semester super easily. We can't look at a project and say, what is its history? Who led it this semester? Who was the team? How many of them were taking it for credit? How many of them were just for experience? How many of them had attended the whole meeting, all the meetings? We can't tell what the total attendances are. It's a mess. I'm sure it seems a mess. Using venue and submittee, not fun. We have to merge those together at the end of the semester to try to get an idea of what someone's attendance is. And we also can't do things that are less important, but would be super useful. We can't really easily tell what projects should be matched with mentors. And we can't tell what projects should be grouped together. These are just a couple more. So if you think about it, when you submit status updates, there's no real reason we're asking you for your name and your project name, or even direct links to your contributions, right? If we had everything organized and together in one spot, we'd be able to pull all of that automatically for you whenever we need it. So, at the very least, these questions need to have easy answers. So as a result, we spend the majority of each semester wrangling with all this spread out information. And sometimes pieces of our infrastructure fall out of use. So the handbook was dropped for years before we revamped it. The old version of Observatory was dropped. The versions before that were dropped. It's a disaster. And this takes away from us being able to actively contribute to RCOS, help out members, mentors, and so on. So, we had a vision. This also came up when I met with an old RCOS alumna coordinator, Alex, and we just happened to talk around about RCOS and how hard it was to manage, and I realized he had a list of issues that he found while running RCOS years ago, and they matched up the issues that I was facing, and I was like, how can this be? How can it be that after 5 years, the same exact issues, nothing has changed? So I thought, what if all RCOS data, and I mean all, could be centralized in one place? And what if that data, which is super related to each other, right? I mean, projects are related to users are related to small groups, everything is really connected. What if we could store it somewhere where all of that, those relationships were easily recognized? And what if we could store it somewhere where we could easily query and manage that data? And what if we could store it somewhere so that we can just make any front end, any website, any Discord bot, anything that just doesn't have its own data, but just pulls from the same? And I had the biggest question. Why didn't I just realize this was just a database? After I wrote all these things, I said, wait a minute. That's a database. Hence, the RCOS database was born. Now, important to note, this is only one of the many different projects we're taking up, us, the coordinator team, and Professor Turner, this school year and going forward, to revamp RCOS infrastructure. So, this isn't the only thing we're doing, but it is serving as the central thing we're doing. It is the single source of truth for all RCOS data. In fact, all of you in this call now, yes, you are in the database. In fact, if I copy your Discord ID, I could figure out who you are. And because of you being in the database, I was able to obviously set your nickname to your real name, or really the name you gave us, and link your Discord account to your RCOS identity, right? That's all thanks to the database. So this means no more anarchy. I should put an asterisk and say, well, RCOS will always be at least probably like 80% anarchy, but less anarchy. So gone are the days of not knowing who somebody is when they send a message on the Mattermost, right? No longer are the days of not knowing if someone who hasn't submitted status updates is doing RCOS for credit or not. None of that. That is the purpose of the RCOS database, to answer all those questions and to help us not go crazy. So, in case you're not familiar with databases, relational database systems, or anything at all, I'm going to quickly go into an extremely brief and incomplete relational database crash course. If you are an SQL guru, I apologize for any egregious errors or anything, or not errors, but oversimplifications, but just for the sake of the rest of this workshop, I'll briefly go through stuff. So databases, we're talking about relational databases, so like things that use SQL, Postgres, MySQL, right? We're not talking about Mongo or anything like that your RCOS projects might use. There are things called tables. Tables have columns, also called fields, right? So here's something directly pulled from the RCOS database, the semesters table. It has a semester ID. Varchar is short for variant character, just means text. So the semester ID is the unique thing that identifies the semester. A semester also has a title, a start date, and an end date. So lots of RCOS data, of course, depends on semesters. We have a table here, so there would be records or rows in the semesters table for every semester that we have in our database. So for right now, I could tell you off the top of my head, this current semester, the semester ID is 2021-01. And that's the official ID that SIS uses to identify the semester, so we just stole it, and that's what we use in our database. The title is Spring 2021, and the start and end dates are whatever it shows in the academic calendar. Now, the main advantage of a relational database is in the word relational. You can define relationships between different tables. So here's a super important example. In this case, we see a messy screenshot. The semesters and meetings table has a connection between the two. And importantly, semester ID is connected to semester ID in both tables. Notice the 1. I don't know if you can see my mouse. The 1 and the asterisk. This is saying that every meeting must have a semester ID, and it must have a semester ID that is a real semester ID from one of the semesters in the table, but also there's a connection in the sense that one semester can have many meetings. And likewise, looking at it from the other way, a meeting belongs to a semester. Right? So we could be using, you might be thinking, why not just use Google Sheets for all of our data? Because it's pretty similar. We've got rows and columns. We could do that, but it's more difficult to enforce rules like this. Meetings must have a real semester. Semesters, there can be these relationships between so many different tables in our database. And then, of course, there's queries. It'd be pretty useless if all we could do is, put stuff in the database. So we use the SQL language to query the database and do things like create, read, update, and destroy data. So really brief examples. This isn't stuff that we type ourselves. This is usually stuff that the programs we write that interface with the database run. Sometimes we're hard coding it in the sense that we're writing insert into and we're having it fill in variables. Other times we use tools like Python libraries or any language libraries that abstract this out for us and make it easier. Here's how we would add a semester. Insert into semesters and then the values for each column. Here's how we would get all the semesters from the database, only asking for their ID and their title. And here's how we would update a particular semester. For example, update the semester that has the ID of this, set its title to Windy Semester. You could tell I was doing this a few nights ago and it was blown in my windows. So what? Well, as a result, instead of spending who knows how long trying to figure out through all the different places, the submittee team, project proposals, and venue, and RCOS.io, or whatever, Google Sheets, what projects there are this semester, we have this relatively simple query. I say relatively since it might look pretty complicated if you're not familiar with SQL, but if you are, then you'll know it's a very simple query. And we get something like this. Like instantly, right? Assuming our data is in, we get this. And this is actual data as of a couple weeks ago, I think. All of a sudden, now it shows us all the projects, their external organizations, if they are, the stacks they use, and the size of their teams. Pretty cool stuff. Another example, another pretty basic query, gives us users. Not only users, but what projects they're on, whether they're a project lead for that project, and the stack that their project uses. Pretty cool. So let's look at what is stored in this database. So I'm not going to go through the entire schema unless people are interested and want to ask. So I figured, might as well say this. Feel free to ask questions like in the workshop text channel at any point, or even if you want to unmute and interrupt me, feel free to. But I'm also going to have a whole time at the end for you to ask any questions you want to. So let's look at some super important tables in the RCOS database. Number 1, the users table. Obviously, this stores users, anyone related to RCOS, but this is interesting because it stores students, faculty, and external users. Now when I say stores, I mean that in a loose sense because we aren't using the database to its full potential just yet, but we've tried to future-proof it as much as we can, so it has the ability to store external users. So any of those IBM people eventually will be in the database. They'll have an account in RCOS, so we'll be able to keep track of them a little better. And you can see here, this is user data that doesn't change based on the semester. Their name, their cohort, their role is whether they are a student, faculty, external, etc. Their time zone, all of that. Of course, we need a projects table, probably most important to RCOS. And this stores project data that doesn't depend on a specific semester as well. You can see the theme here, right? We have some tables that store data about entities that should be true all the time, or updated sometimes, whatever, but their values don't depend upon a specific semester. So a project has a title, description, a stack, links to important things like cover image, homepage, repositories that it uses, and an optional link to an external organization that owns it, like IBM. Note here that there is no field or column for the creator of the project, or the owner of the project, or the project lead, right? Because that depends upon the semester. And then my either first favorite table, and yes, I do have favorite SQL tables, that tells you how much time I've put into this, is the enrollments table. This is pretty cool. So previously, there have been some attempts at a database for RCOS, but there was nothing that was all-encompassing. RCOS.io has its own MongoDB database. It only stores stuff for Mongo. One big mistake it made was not separating stuff based on the semester. So if you look at RCOS.io, you go to a specific project, you click on it, and you see the number of... oh, you know what? Let's look at this, actually. And you go to a specific project. Where the heck is... Here we go. You look at the contributors and you go, whoa, that's a whole lot of people. Except, wait a minute. When was Aaron on this project? Is he on it now? When was Eric on this project? Is it now, or how many semesters, right? This doesn't make any separations between different semesters. So I can't tell at all when people were on this project, how many people were on each semester, and all of that. That's, of course, where enrollments come in. So for each of you, in this workshop right now, there is a row for you. Maybe I'll show you afterwards, but I don't want to screen share too much sensitive data. There's a row for each of you that says semester ID equals this semester, username equals your username, project ID equals whatever the ID of your project is project lead. Some of you I know are project leads here, so it'll be true for some of you, false for some. And this is where we store your credits, your mid-year and final grade, whether you're a coordinator or not, whether you're a project lead or not, all of that. This connects multiple tables, right? So it connects the semesters table and the users table, and also the projects table. With this table, in tandem with the other ones and the relationships, we can instantly ask questions like, who was enrolled in RCOS last semester for credit on open circuits? Or who was the project lead of YACS in spring 2021? Or how many people are doing RCOS for experience? Or what percentage of people do RCOS for experience over credit per semester? You know, we could do anything like that instantly without having to go to any 4 or 5 different services and pull our hair out and copy and paste and do any of that stuff. Many other tables in the database depend on this thing. It's definitely my favorite table. One that you might all be familiar with if you've looked at the RCOS calendar is the meetings table. This, of course, stores all meetings each semester, and meetings have a lot of interesting properties, more than you might think. Starting off, meetings can be different types, right? Some meetings are large group meetings, some are small group, some are private coordinator meetings or mentor meetings. There are workshops. If we look at the calendar, in fact, this pulls directly from the database. So we can see it's even color coded. Large groups are red, workshops are yellow, right? So that's not like, whoop-de-doo, it's red and yellow. But the idea is that stuff's stored in one place, and then anything we use to query it, whether it be this website or a Discord bot or another website, can determine how to display it however they want. But they don't need to do anything special because the information is in the database. They just need to display it in a nice way. So what you see here are meetings where is public equals true. So meetings have a start and end time, a title, an optional agenda. Of course, in these unprecedented times, we had to add some stuff for remote learning. So we have is remote, that's true or false, where it's meeting, the link to slides, all of that fun stuff. This is why we kept saying we're going to have an automatic meeting reminder. It's actually super easy to. We just need a way to, realistically, we just need to sit down and take the time to do it. But what it would just be is, we write a Python script that every 10 minutes checks the database, sees if there's any public meeting starting in the next 10 minutes, pulls it, and then sends a Discord webhook, right? That was previously impossible. We used a Google Sheets for a schedule in previous semesters. It was a disaster. Now it's all automated. If you look closely, you'll see presentation markdown. And note that I'm using Reveal.js. One thing I'd love to see one day is us getting rid of Google Slides. Google Slides is great, and that's collaborative, but I have a vision of a future RCOS, maybe beyond my time, maybe 3021, where based on the agenda, based on the type and the title, and the markdown here, we can automatically generate RCOS meeting slides, which would be so cool. If instead of us having to copy and paste Google Slides and drag and drop and type and fix dates, we can automatically generate HTML for a meeting and then just use the framework that makes these slides work to turn it into a presentable slideshow. And for the actual content of the workshops, or the meetings, could be workshops, could be large group meetings, we can just store it as text in the database record. Why is that so cool? Well, it would mean that a meeting and its slideshow, its presentation, is entirely self-contained in one place. I think that's so cool. That's of course why I'm trying to do Reveal.js. But for now though, we do have external presentations. That's why we still use Google Slides. And second most cool, this is the one closest to what I've had to work with, are chat associations. So anyone here, there might be some people who've had to manage a Discord server with bots. I don't know if any of you guys are here, but I'm sure you have something super similar to this, where you need to make associations between things and Discord things. So in our case, we need to make associations between projects and Discord roles and Discord text channels and voice channels. So if any of you, assuming all of you are enrolled in RCOS, you don't necessarily have to be here right now, and you're on a project, you have access to your project channel. I could change the name of that project channel, no problem, and everything would still work great. Because in the database, we have the association between project and the ID of its Discord thing. So here's an example. I forget what project this is, but this record, this row in the chat associations table says the project with ID 148 is associated with the Discord role with this ID on the server. What this means is we can easily write a Python script or with the Discord Discord bot that queries the database and immediately finds the role for a project or the role for a small group or the category for a small group, any of that. Pretty cool. This lets us build up the Discord server easily and tear it down easily. You might be wondering why then it's taking me like weeks at the start of each semester to do it. It's because we keep changing the infrastructure and I keep having to rewrite the stuff, but now we have settled on this database. So once we write that code once, we'll be able to use that going forward every semester. Hopefully. And getting towards the end of all this, that's nowhere near everything that's stored in the database. Here are some other things that are stored. You briefly saw semesters earlier, but we're also keeping track of small groups. We're also keeping track of user accounts. So previously I mentioned before this workshop started that all of you here, by nature of having gone through the RCOS Discord cast connector, were entered into the RCOS database with your RPI RCS ID and your Discord account ID. That's why I know some people refer to the RCOS Discord servers like the doxing server, because then people could see your real name if you log in with your Discord account. But well, it helps us keep track of everything on the server, right? That's stored in the user accounts table. Things with an asterisk here are not utilized at the moment, but one day hopefully will be. The biggest concern when designing the database was this should store all past, present, and future RCOS data. So how can we make it as future-proof as possible? So even though right now we do not handle status updates ourselves, Submity does that, and we don't handle attendance ourselves, Submity and Venue do that, this database can handle it. And dare I say, I guess I'm biased, better than Venue and Submity ever could. Hopefully one day we'll be able to use it. And if not, we'll at least be able to pull from Submity and Venue, put it into our database so we have it in a central place and we can do stuff with it. I'll let you in on a little secret. Grading at the end of each semester in RCOS is hell. It takes hours upon hours. The max I remember from the past 3 years is like 6 or 7 hours straight of going through a Google Sheets and trying to figure out who people are and how many attendances and their commits and look at these commits and why is this person missing and why does that person not exist anywhere except here. Terrible. I have nightmares about it. So with the database, if everything's in, it's not unrealistic to say we can get 90% of your grade in a query. and the rest will be us manually looking through your commits and giving you, a grade on that. We can seriously cut down hours upon hours of work that takes us a long time to do, and then takes us an even longer time to verify. Do it in, split seconds. That's just one of the many benefits of having everything in one database. So here's just to give you a brief idea, I'll drop the link to this as well. This isn't up to date per se. There might be a few fields that differ from how it actually is in the production version of the database. But this was what was used to design the database. Really cool website where you get to write in a really simple format and you get to see a visualization. So just to show you how all these connections work, anytime you see a line, that's a relationship between tables. So let's look at a basic example. Meeting attendances and meetings, and what else? And users. Here we see meeting attendances has meeting ID and the username, and then some other extra stuff. So a meeting attendance is exactly what it sounds like. If someone attends a meeting, a record is added where the meeting ID is the meeting they attended and the username is their username. And so we were able to specifically say there's a connection between meeting ID and actual meeting IDs and the username here and actual user usernames. What does that mean? Well, it means I can't accidentally, or I guess purposefully, try to put a record in the meeting attendances table that has an invalid username or meeting ID. So not only is it saying there's a connection between the two, but it's saying if I'm trying to put in, let's say I'm trying to manually put in an attendance for me in here and I misspell my RCS ID, it will reject it. It'll say, whoa, there is no such user with that RCS ID. So the benefits are, enormous, because not only does it kind of help us keep track of what is related to what, but it even enforces the database to make sure our data is, I don't want to say perfect or valid, but at least not totally invalid, right? It puts some restraints on that. And this also means that I can easily do queries like how many times has, I'm going to choose someone randomly from the attendees here, let's say Nicholas Y. So how many times has Nicholas Y attended meetings in general? Well, I can just query. Let's say I don't even have his username. I just have his name and his cohort. I can write a query that looks for the user with Nicholas as the first name and the last name starting with Y and the cohort of 2021. And then query the meeting attendances to see how many attendances they have based on the username connection. So from a distance, this might look like a mess, but if you look closer, everything was designed to be as clear as possible. URLs end with URL. Dates end with date. Date times end with date time. Right. So if you go through this, I do think it'll be very readable. Maybe not all the connections will be clear, but feel free to go through this. Pretty interesting knowing that some of your data is in this system and it's working pretty well. And of course, I'll answer any questions about that. But we also store status updates. So for example, imagine a time where you can submit a status update on a website, an RCOS website, where you just fill in 3 text boxes: this week, next week, and blockers. And because you've already connected your GitHub account or your GitLab account in the, if I could find it, the chat, the user accounts, right? Maybe you've connected your GitHub account and your username. Well, for each status update, we know the time it opens. We know your username. From that, we know your GitHub username. Well, we can just pull up with the GitHub API, GitLab API, all of the commits you've made to your project. How do we know how to get it from your project? Well, we have your username. We know the current semester. We go to enrollments, username, semester. We get your project. We go to projects. Where are projects? Wherever projects are here, we go to the repository URL, and that's how we get your commits. So we can really automate so much currently manual stuff to make it not only easier for us to manage, but easier for all RCOS members to do stuff, right? We're imagining a time where you don't need to wrangle with the submittee to do status updates or submit attendance, but everything is all under RCOS's umbrella, in data in a format that we understand, that matches how we know RCOS members want to submit stuff. At one point, we'll be able to have, a dashboard where you can see estimates of your grade, like in real time, right? We can show you your attendances. We can show you your missing attendances. We can show you your, whether you need to go to a workshop or whether you missed a status update or whether you made up attendances or, however many commits we have on record for you. All of that is previously utterly impossible, or would take obscene amount of effort. It wouldn't be worth it. But with this database, totally possible. We just need to find the time to make it. Very briefly, since now it's getting close to 40 minutes, here are some uses. The Discord cast portal uses this database, as previously mentioned, uses cast to log in. It creates a user for you if you don't exist. You connect your Discord account with OAuth, connects that in the database. The Discord bot, we're working on it. Here's a really simple kind of flowchart for what an example command might do. A user does /whoami or something. The bot says, yes, the bot is not running at the moment. I know, it runs locally. We're trying to get it on the server, don't worry. It goes to the database, it says, okay, find this person based on their Discord ID, and then you can do whatever you want. And Telescope. So I think, Naya's here. So she's working on Telescope, which is the replacement for Observatory that I'll be using the RCOS database instead of its own separate database. And because of that, even if anything is abandoned, we still have our central database. So Telescope is going to be like the central thing for all things RCOS. And it's easier to maintain and develop because you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We already have the schema and the design for all of our database stuff. And just really briefly, someone mentioned, how about backups? So we're actually using DigitalOcean, a managed Postgres database. So we already have, automated backups, and we can roll back and all that stuff. We had a big discussion about whether to do this on just like a VPS on a server, or whether to pay a little bit extra and have DigitalOcean or some other provider manage it for us. We figured we should just have it managed for us. So, in conclusion, our data was disorganized. This database aims to store all RCOS data. RCOS infrastructure going forward will use it as the central source of data. There'll just be dummy front ends for the data. And hopefully, this means more time for the RCOS leadership to participate and nurture the RCOS community. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk, everyone. And any questions? Thank you for the comments. But yeah, if there are any questions, I'll hang around for, however long, 5 minutes or longer if anyone has any questions. But feel free to hop out. Yeah, so I took a screenshot for attendance, so I'll be handling that. I'll make sure I got everyone. Thanks for coming. Wow, look at that. I ended at 40 minutes. That's crazy. In that case, I'll stop recording now.